Most people think power is about asserting yourself, about responding fast, explaining, defending. But in psychology, the strongest position is often the opposite. It's silence. When you stop reacting, something unsettling happens. The balance shifts. The other person loses all feedback, control, and certainty, left alone in a communication vacuum. Our brains are social. Being ignored can trigger the same areas that process physical pain. This isn't about rudeness. In a negotiation, strategic silence signals confidence, compelling the other side to fill the void, often with concessions. It's a move of self-mastery. But in a relationship, that same silence becomes a weapon. When it's used to punish, it's no longer strategic. It's stonewalling, a form of emotional abuse that quietly erodes trust. So the power isn't just in withholding a response, it's in the intent behind it, the crucial difference between creating space for understanding and creating a void just to control.
You speak and receive nothing back, just silence. Your brain doesn't register that as neutral. It registers it as a problem, an error that must be solved. Because the human brain is fundamentally wired for feedback. A response means safety. A reaction means you know where you stand. But silence breaks prediction. Neuroscience shows us that our brain is constantly scanning for social cues. It's looking for three things: confirmation of our status, our relevance, and our sense of control. When someone ignores you, they remove all three at once. There's no signal to read, no path for correction, no reassurance. And that raw uncertainty triggers a deep, primal discomfort. This isn't because the person being ignored is weak. It's because the brain absolutely hates an open loop. It's a circuit left unfinished, a question with no answer. And here's the part that gets misunderstood. Being ignored doesn't just hurt because of rejection. It hurts because the mind, for a moment, can't locate itself anymore. It's suddenly adrift with no social map to follow. Every interaction we have is an exchange: words, emotion, attention. Even a heated argument is a form of cooperation. You speak, they respond. The loop continues, the system is active. But when one person stops responding, the entire exchange collapses. There's no argument to counter, no defense to offer, no explanation to give. There is just absence. And absence is profoundly destabilizing because it gives you nothing to push against. It's like trying to lean on a wall that isn't there. This is where the true nature of power reveals itself. Power doesn't come from winning the exchange. It comes from ending it. People often think they're in control because they're the one talking, because they're driving the conversation forward. But talking is what keeps the system alive. It feeds the loop. Silence is what shuts it all down. It's the off switch. And that brings us to the final piece. The moment you try to explain yourself to someone who is ignoring you, you hand over your leverage. Explanation is a signal. It tells the other person three things: that you are affected by their silence, that you are invested in the outcome, and that you desperately want to be understood. In a raw power dynamic, that's just information they can use. Silence, on the other hand, gives nothing away. When you choose to be silent, you don't confirm their assumptions about you. You don't validate whatever narrative they're building in their head. And most importantly, you don't reveal your emotional position. This complete lack of data forces the other person to fill in the blanks themselves. And more often than not, they fill them with anxiety. So you see, silence doesn't say nothing. It says something incredibly powerful. It says, I don't need this interaction to continue.
What happens in the quiet says it all. You stop replying, you step back from the argument, you just stop. That silence is a test, and the results that come back reveal everything you need to know, not just about the person you're dealing with, but about yourself. See, not everyone reacts the same way to being ignored. A healthy, centered person, they might feel a momentary sting of confusion or disappointment, but then they do something remarkable. They recalibrate. They take the data, your silence, and they adjust, they disengage, they move on. They understand that their worth isn't tied to your response. But then there's the other reaction, the one from people who rely on control, who are starved for validation, who need to feel a sense of dominance to feel secure. For them, your silence isn't an absence of communication, it's an act of war. You've removed their leverage. You've cut the strings they use to manipulate the world around them. And so they escalate. The phone buzzes again and again. The tone of the messages sharpens, shifting from friendly to demanding. Then come the subtle jabs, the passive-aggressive comments, the little provocations designed to do one thing and one thing only: get a response. Any response will do. Your anger is a win. Your frustration is a victory, because any reaction proves they still have power over you. Your silence is their kryptonite, and their frantic, escalating reaction reveals more about their internal wiring than any argument ever could. But this is where we often get the concept of ignoring completely wrong, and this distinction is critical. Ignoring is not power when it's reactive, when it's just you giving them the silent treatment as a weapon. It's not power when it's passive-aggressive, a childish way to punish someone without using your words. That's just playing the same toxic game, but from a different position on the board. You're still reacting. You're still letting them dictate your emotional state. Real power is something else entirely. It's non-reactivity. It's a profound internal shift. You don't ignore someone to send a message. You ignore them because you've looked at their behavior, their words, their provocations, and you've realized there is nothing to respond to. There is no substance, no genuine attempt at connection. It's just noise. You aren't withholding a response out of spite. You simply have no response to give. The conversation, for you, is already over. That difference is subtle, and it is everything. It's the difference between holding your breath underwater, tense and waiting, and standing on the shore, breathing easy, watching the waves crash. One is an act of endurance. The other is a state of being. True power isn't loud. It doesn't chase resolution at all costs. It doesn't need to have the last word to feel validated. There's a principle in psychology. The most stable position in any system is the one that requires the least amount of response. The person constantly explaining, defending, reacting, they're on shaky ground, their balance dependent on others. But the person who can remain centered in the face of provocation, who can choose stillness over chaos, is standing on solid rock. Because silence, true non-reactive silence, is the lowest cost position of all. It costs you no energy. It takes none of your peace. And in that quiet, you realize your strength was never in the comeback. It was in not needing to come back at all.
Ignoring people isn't about winning a game. It's about achieving internal stability. When you refuse to react, you starve the very dynamics that drain your energy. You quietly remove yourself from pointless exchanges and save your mental focus for what truly matters. The most dangerous people aren't loud. They aren't constantly reacting or explaining themselves to everyone. They are masters of their attention. They choose precisely where it goes, and more importantly, where it doesn't. Their silence isn't a void. It's a deliberate selection. Once you grasp this, you stop trying to control others and start mastering your own position. If you want to understand how power really works, not through aggression, but through psychology, restraint, and awareness, then this channel is for you. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this. No noise, no hype, just clear insight into how the mind behaves under pressure. Because once you see the patterns, you're no longer part of them.